Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're well. My name's Alex, and this is Slumber Time Podcast. Welcome to what I'd like to call the Writer's Workshop. Basically, I want this podcast to be like a workshop, like you have in school, when you discuss different ideas for pieces. Instead of reading drafts or finished works today, though, we'd like to start at the beginning of the writing process. The way this is going to work for the first one here is my friend PJ and I are going to be looking at some of the worst cliches in literature. He brought 2 or 3, and I did the same. We'll discuss our thoughts on them, how they've been done well, and even explain a little about what we do with them in our own writings as well. The point of this is to inspire us and everybody listening to write more, while also teaching us some important themes we should avoid, as well as better ways to implement them. If you'd like to check out PJ's channel and website, I will link them below. Either way, welcome back, PJ. How you doing, man?
Hi, Alex. Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing just fine. Yeah.
Good, good.
So,
Well,
yeah,
look, I'm looking forward to today's podcast.
glad to hear it.
Talking about literature. Sounds good.
Something I actually didn't tell you before is with the last podcast that we did together, the interview with a dreamer, it actually did pretty decently on Buzzsprout and some of the other
Good.
podcast sites like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
I
need
did
to
not
check
tell you that
YouTube.
because I wanted it to be a surprise.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yep. It was the most
Okay,
downloaded
enjoyable.
podcast of all of the ones that I posted on that side. On the YouTube
Really?
side, it was, of course, the Dreams Deferred episode.
Yeah. Well, okay. Geez, well, that's great. Didn't
Yeah.
know that. Well, that's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's
Obviously,
pretty cool.
I thought it was maybe a bit too long, but then, all right. Well, it seems to be that people enjoyed it, so that's great.
There are 2 types of people, I
That's really
feel,
good.
in this case. Those who really like the short ones, get the information and go. And then there are those who want an interesting conversation, something in the background, and maybe learn something along the way.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a light-hearted conversation, even though it was all about literature and maybe, not like everyday stuff. But I felt like it was a conversation you can kind of dive in and out of, right?
Yeah, and I
So
think a
it's
lot of
nice.
people are interested in literature, and they like brainstorming some ideas, hearing other people's ideas. So,
Yeah, no, it's fun, dude. Yeah. Jeez, well,
and
I'm glad to hear that. Some good news.
yeah, and that is, of course, the key point for today. As I'm calling this the writer's workshop, like in school, you'd get with your classmates and go over some different writing topics, discuss different themes, and yeah, try to make something of it. And I'd like to try to do that a bit today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead then. Can't wait.
So yeah, for the first topic, and I think what's going to happen is we're splitting this podcast into 2, depending on how long we talk about just this first topic. I think with, knowing us, we might be able to talk
Well,
about this for 40
we can
minutes.
we can go on and on. I know.
Yes.
I know. I know. All right.
And if we
Well, let's
do
go
go on
ahead.
and on and split it into 2, that's going to really help the next podcast.
Well, we might have to split it into 3 or 4, Alex. Knowing the way we talk, deep into the midnight hours. But okay. Well, look, I'll try and keep it short. I won't be too loquacious.
No need. All I ask is that we probably do split it into 2 so that I have enough time to prepare the podcasts for after this, which I'm pretty
Okay.
excited about, as long as you like literature. If you're following
Right,
from some
okay.
of the science stuff I've done, I might do some of that again afterwards, but I like bouncing around from topic to topic. So
Yeah.
today,
Why
the
not?
main topic is, which cliches do you hate? So,
Mm,
PJ, which cliches just
mm.
drive you mad?
All right. Well, Deus Ex Machina
Mm,
drives me mad.
mm,
So, or just to clarify that, that's basically it's a Greek term. Kind of means something like God out of the machine, right, Alex?
Yep. They would actually have a crane behind stage. I mean, not like a crane as we have
Oh
today,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they would actually bring in the gods from above, like a crane.
And basically, to give you some context, is back in when you're doing a play, and let's say the hero is just about to die, or something, something's happening, and he can't get out of the situation, or she, or then this crane comes and just takes the protagonist out of the situation into a safe environment.
Hmm.
So I hate that.
They just write
Um,
themselves into a corner, basically, and just need something to save the hero.
exactly, yeah, just to finish a story. but it's used nowadays. Obviously, it's a metaphorical crane now, right? So basically, just the writers, the way they write the screenplay is that it's using action heroes all the time, right? Action films, sorry. That
Mm.
basically, Bruce Willis, I don't know, he's got to save, two trains at once or something like that, and his wife is about to die, and New York is about to just explode, and just somehow he solves the solution with something completely unexpected. The bomb detonator actually falls right into his palm, given by God, and that's the end of the story. It's solved.
Oh
So that's
yeah,
kind of Deus Ex Machina.
Superman,
Uh,
basically just turning back time by flying around the world. That was never explained beforehand in the movie. No one knew he could do
right,
that.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And well, what do you think about Deus Ex Machina? I also have a particular reason why I hate it as a writer. I mean, what can you give some examples of films or books or plays in which you've seen this done?
Well, apart from the one I just mentioned, I guess yeah,
Yeah,
it is like superhero movies do that quite a bit. Putting me on the
yeah,
spot with this one.
all,
Uh,
all the time. Well, actually, but you've got the podcast about the overrated movies. You
okay.
know, it's usually the overrated movies I find that have the Deus Ex Machina, and that people just seem to kind of, just seem to kind of accept it. So you said all these superhero movies, well,
Yeah,
they just don't make sense often. Yeah,
at times they
that's what I mean.
can. I guess the first one that comes to mind right now is one of my favorite shows, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'd get a
Okay,
lot of crap if I said I didn't like that, and
okay,
trust me, I watched it like 3 times. It's amazing. Basically, at the
okay,
very
gotta watch it.
end, spoilers for Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh,
Came out in
careful.
2008. It's fine.
Okay.
Basically, the main character gets a power. He doesn't want to kill the leader of the opposing country, basically. And as an air nomad, as someone who's taught peace throughout his life, he wants to find a way around doing that. And
Mm,
basically, we hear about this type of animal once in the show before, but then he meets an animal that gives him a power just to steal the other person's powers. And
right, right, okay.
out of nowhere. The fight scene up until then is fine, and this is like 30 seconds or a minute of the show of when he just steals the person's power, and it's totally fine as long as you kind of ignore that point.
Oh, okay, yeah, but it ruins the whole kind of it ruins the whole. It takes the truth out of the narrative. You know what I mean? You're kind of believing everything, and
Well, the
that's what's so great about
conflict
stories.
becomes unknown at that point, is kind of what
Yeah.
the issue is. When you know what everyone's abilities are and what's in play.
So it's like a chessboard, basically. See the story as a chessboard,
Yeah.
and you've got your pieces, and then all of a sudden it's like an incredible extra piece, like a piece even stronger than the queen, and it just pops out of nowhere, actually during the end of the game, and makes you win the game. So it's always going against rationality and against the narrative and
The rules they set
against
up.
believing the story. Yeah, well, it's awful. Like, so I hate that basically, and I think also when you're writing stories, it's very easy to fall into that trap. So I hate that myself. I hate Deus Ex Machina not just as a viewer, but I hate it as a writer. So if I notice that I'm trying to write a plot, trying to solve a plot, that's what happens so much in action movies, because there's a whole sequence of events that follow logically, but sometimes it's actually hard to continue that cause and effect. Writing it down, it's hard to follow it, and you end up in a corner, and you think, oh, I literally have to add another element to this, even if it doesn't make sense. So I find that's very typical when you're writing, and I think that's why it also happens in series a lot, TV series, where it starts off great, and then at the end something incredible happens and it ruins the last episode of the whole show, because I feel like writers can't get out of that corner.
Yeah, they need to have something set up beforehand. So I was going to ask you, kind of what could make a Deus Ex Machina work, but in a way, I guess I kind of answered it there, at least for myself.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
need to show that it's possible beforehand. I guess it's Chekhov's gun. Like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
need to
Of
show them
course, yeah.
that this could happen. This is within the realm of possibility. You put the pieces together yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. In Chekhov's gun, it's basically the idea is that there is a gun in the scene, and that's going to be used at some point. So there's this big build of expectation. And Deus Ex Machina is kind of the opposite. You weren't expecting that. And I think it also makes the viewer annoyed or the reader. Where so it's kind of the opposite. You're expecting something in Chekhov and you might be annoyed if it doesn't happen. And with this Deus Ex Machina, you're just surprised all of a sudden that happens, that this another character appears, or this incredible thing happens all of a sudden.
Well, I really appreciate it when it doesn't happen, personally.
Yeah,
Like, they
exactly. Yeah.
show it and then do something else. That's great.
Yeah, because I mean, because it's becoming kind of a Deus Ex Machina has become so typical that even though it's a surprising element, it's become like you're expecting this amazing thing to happen and the hero to survive. And sometimes it's nice to see that things don't always go so smoothly. Maybe, the Bruce Willis, he should lose a leg in one of those movies. It's just not realistic. He
Yeah.
keeps shooting and the bullets keep missing. It's not. So I find that very irritating,
So I
actually.
suppose you prefer tragedies to comedies.
Well, yeah, and I really enjoyed the tragic comedies.
Oh, okay.
Mixing it up a bit, right? That makes sense to me. Because
You'd
it doesn't
enjoy
make sense
Shakespeare's
to.
problem plays then.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and yeah, that's one thing that annoys me. What about yourself? Any cliches or stereotypes?
Oh, yeah. I have 4 listed. I'm going to talk about.
Jeez.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not going to talk about all of them, probably. I'll just go ahead and mention the list. So
Yeah.
my list is the liar revealed, the
Okay.
misunderstanding, the big bad establishment, if you understand what that one means, and like
Okay.
propaganda plays. The one I want to
Propaganda
talk
plays.
about is actually the establishment there. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so often, the establishment, the school, the government, they're always black and white. They're always the bad guy. There's no gray area whatsoever. I like when they bend it and there's the gray area. So the ones that do it okay, I think, is
Uh-huh.
like Count of Monte Cristo with Mondego.
Yeah.
You see that he's a bad guy, but you also get to know him and his family. And
Mm,
The Fugitive, I think, is a great one. You've seen that one?
okay. No, I haven't seen that one. No.
It's
So what?
basically a guy is accused of killing his wife. He didn't do it,
Okay.
and he's on the run from the police, basically.
Uh,
The police are chasing him, but they have a very clear reason to do it. It's not the police being bad, it's the police doing their job.
right. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that reminds me a bit of this idea of, for example, that you can't go against one's nature, really, right? So there is this novel by Clive Barker. It's called Mr. Begone. So he's a horror writer, but he's an unusual kind of horror writer, kind of philosophical. Basically, the whole novel is about Mr. Begone, who's kind of a demon, and he can't help it being bad. So the whole novel is about him doing terrible things, but he just can't help it. And then I think that also creates a lot of empathy. So I
Oh,
like that, in fact.
actually,
So
yeah. I have that as something to discuss in the next topic after
uh,
we talk about cliches. But just as a
okay, cool.
brief look into that, that's basically what M is like for me by
Yeah,
Fritz Lang.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
I
that
know
nature
exactly what
that
you
he
mean.
has to kill children. Spoilers, by the way.
That's a great movie.
Sorry, it's a
Your favorite movie,
90-year
right?
old
As far as I
movie.
remember. Is it 90 years old? Okay,
Yeah, it was made
that's
in the
crazy.
1930s.
But it feels very modern, doesn't it? That
It
feel, and it
does.
feels very realistic because, right, it's so easy to just read the newspaper and judge that person.
Mm.
But imagine you actually know this person, M, and that person, M, sadly is your cousin. You can't excuse it, but you somehow try to at least delude yourself or explain to yourself, or at least you'll find some kind of empathy for that cousin because he was a nice guy until you knew that, and he hasn't actually changed, just your perspective. So I find that a movie like M explains it very well, and because they mob against him. Sorry,
Mm.
that's a terrible spoiler actually. So please know that they go against him, although you can guess that by the story. But the way the movie portrays it is that you feel sorry for
Yeah.
M.
And that
Right? You feel
final
sorry that
monologue just
yeah,
has you feel for him because he can't control himself very well. And
yeah,
yeah, that one's less about the establishment necessarily, but it's definitely one of those where nature's important. But
I
I'm
feel like it
hmm,
still is a lot about establishment because if you look at was it 1931 it was made? I
I
think
think
so, right?
so. Yeah.
Well, you see,
Well, there's the
Hitler was
scenes with the
just around the
police.
corner. Okay,
I was just going to say there's
what
the
you
scenes
saying?
with the police. That's the closest thing to the establishment. So they're
Hmm.
the ones also trying to catch this person. And like, I
Yeah,
don't know their story or don't remember their story completely.
yeah. But they're sort of characterless, right? They're sort of just kind of police just chasing him, and we empathize with M. And I just wanted to say that Hitler was just around the corner, or he was there, but he was just about to rise
Mm,
to power. So I feel like it is that establishment, but it's not the typical just the police or whatever. It's actually the whole society turning sinister. A twisted person like M is also just a victim
mm.
from that broken down society because it's become a sick society by then, Germany in the 30s.
And that's how you
So
make it interesting. Like when you said,
yeah,
okay, imagine a killer. Like, okay, boring. That's all the time. Then you say, he's your cousin.
hmm
You got me
yeah,
hooked.
yeah,
You
yeah,
have
right.
that
Because he can.
connection.
And also you mentioned it in your movies podcast about Hannibal Lecter, right?
Ah,
And was it, was it Red Dragon? I think you mentioned that you could empathize with the villain, for example.
oh yes, yes. So Red Dragon, I cannot remember the character's name for the life of me. It's the
Yeah,
guy with the hair
yeah.
lip, and
Okay, yeah.
basically, yeah, he has a girlfriend in it, and you get to see his story. You get to see what he was
Mm,
like as a kid, basically, and
yeah,
yeah, really empathize with him. But then you have other
yeah.
movies like Patch Adams. All right,
Hmm.
it's just basically the it's the hospital saying, "Oh no, what you're doing is insane," and you have Robin Williams who's just like, "I'm trying to make people better," and it's that
Mm,
hopeful, naive way of going about life, and it's just not realistic or interesting to me.
fair enough. So when you say that establishments annoy you, so just be a bit more specific about that. So does that mean it annoys you when things are black and white? That there's one. It's kind of like the Soviet Union is evil and the U.S. is really good. Is that for an example?
Exactly,
That there?
exactly. You can't just
Yeah, I get it.
portray these people in this position of power as only good and only bad.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because
Well,
same
that's
thing
a good
happened with
point.
like Alice in Wonderland, the live action movie. I doubt you've seen that one.
I haven't seen it. No. Does
But
does that happen as well? There's kind of like a
at,
clear
at the beginning,
baddie,
it's just
and
like, oh, this woman is different. She wants to be different. And everyone's snobby and like, oh, you can't be different. Like,
all right, okay.
it gets on my nerves and it really grates me.
Okay. Trying to think of that, the whole kind of good versus bad thing. I mean, it's obviously been there since civilization exists.
Of
So
course.
it's a stereotype that it's like all these stereotypes, it's impossible to get away from because they're so established in culture and ideology. It's the easiest way to explain things using two terms. If you're going to start saying that John is kind of an okay guy, he's not really that bad, and Mary is good, but she has her faults. That's a lot more complicated than saying John is bad and Mary's good.
Well,
So again, it's kind of a cheap way for writers to write things down, for movies to be done. Again, as you said, like in the at least two podcasts you mentioned now, right? This whole kind of spectacle. I think it's the same kind of thing. It's spectacle is more about action and lights and effects, but this is the same thing. It's kind of a simplification of things, oversimplification. So you really don't have to think about it. It's like
exactly. And that's what gets on my nerves
hate that as
because,
well.
well, we were
Yeah,
just
me too.
talking before we started recording this about some Shakespeare
Yeah,
and how many
yeah,
of the
yeah.
villains are redeemable. It's not
Yeah,
just
definitely.
black and white. Like when you think about, we were talking about Merchant of Venice a little bit,
Hmm.
and Shylock, like he has a great speech
Yeah,
about saying, like, what have I done wrong?
yeah,
Is it just because I'm Jewish? And it's a very anti-Semitic play, as
yeah,
like
definitely.
originally, and it's a bit difficult to defend unless you get rid of some of those terrible parts. But he is not a bad guy. He's just trying to claim a debt that the other person agreed
Definitely
to,
not.
and that's it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's you'll be talking about Shakespeare in the future more, so
Mm,
won't get into it too much. But I think just throughout this whole podcast, Shakespeare can be mentioned from time to time because he often just breaks all these stereotypes. I don't feel Shakespeare personally. Now he's got so many plays that he probably uses a lot of Deus Ex Machina, but overall, I think he does a great job of making it just great literature. Not making it always black and white, not overusing Deus Ex Machina, probably does, and especially for that time where everyone was using Deus Ex Machina and black and white characters, he was going really kind of modernist in his approach and
Yeah.
using a lot of anti-heroes and gray kind of characters and not clear who the baddies are and who the goodies in a lot of the plays. Not all.
Like for his time, what I was reading recently, they were saying that to add
Sure.
comedy to tragedies was just not really done. A tragedy was a tragedy; it was
Yeah,
serious.
yeah,
But there are
yeah,
parts that you'll laugh at.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What was next on your list after Deus Ex Machina?
Yeah, right. So we mentioned this before that it's the portrayal of women
Mm.
that I find really annoying, to be honest. Now, not just because, all right, I am a feminist, but it's not, that's not the main reason. I'm not really going at it from a political angle. I'm going at it just because, again, it's just bad reading, bad viewing. If the women are just these kind of, what's the word? These Rapunzels basically just got to save and they can't do anything. I mean,
Oh.
an example comes to mind. We've talked about this before, actually.
So you mean the Mary
You know
Sue,
the Sam
basically?
Raimi, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man
Oh
movies,
yeah, Mary Jane.
and exactly, but I love those movies, so I'm not getting at them. But to be honest, Mary Jane. Now there are two things about this. I think it's very easy to forget because, all right, if half the population is male, they don't realize this and they don't care and they think Mary Jane is just a very attractive woman. But to be honest, now she's not a very great role model for women issue now or for girls because she's not defending herself. She's not an active figure. So it's this very typical, stereotypical, and damaging role of passive woman letting herself be guided by the man, or in negative cases, mistreated. So it's a very damaging cliche, I find.
A lot of it's, yeah, the Mary Sue cliche. Basically, you have the
Yeah,
woman
exactly.
who's flawless, and that's what they're
Ah,
trying to do
mhm.
with, yeah, Mary Jane here. Ironically, also Mary.
Yes. I mean, look, even the fact that she's called Mary Jane and that there's a word called, Mary Sue stereotype, whatever, that's also sexist. And I feel like that's, you see, the point is, as I mentioned before, I think literature and art should help people. And
Mm.
that's not helping people. That's just misguiding men's judgments of women and giving a bad role model for women and for girls. So I mean, no one's benefiting out of this at all. It's even slightly harmful to read this, I think, or to watch.
So I'm hearing now about that similar situation in the most recent remake of Mulan, how she's just
Oh yeah,
born perfect, and then that's it. I want to lead into how it's done really well, and that's the old
yeah,
Mulan. You know that she's not perfect at first. You know that she has flaws.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why there's the whole "Make a Man Out of You" song.
yeah. But it's not like the modern remake. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest, it's rarely done right. So I mean,
Hmm.
even that song. I mean, right? They said, man. I mean, how politically correct you want to be, but at least there is a build up, and it's a bit like we mentioned about Deus Ex Machina. There's a logical cause and effect in the Disney movie, and it's a Bildungsroman, right? So basically, a novel where or a story where someone grows up to become stronger,
Hmm.
like in Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, for example, or a lot of or most
Mm.
children books. It's about these children or young adults growing up to become stronger and role models. So Disney movies, some of the old ones, at least they do a great job. Some of the new ones as well. And yeah, Mulan, I think did a good job in general.
Oh
The
yeah,
Disney one, I haven't.
and
I'm
it.
not sure. I can't say about the new one.
Well, it's also Disney, unfortunately, but
Right. Okay.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I've heard that it's done quite a bit for the trans and bisexual community.
Oh, has
So a
it?
lot
Yeah.
of people from them really look up to that movie, and it's kind of helped teach people about what it can be like.
We see that's what I love. I just don't like the negative stuff. So Deus Ex Machina is just brain dead material, I find.
And that's what a lot
And
of the cliches are.
yeah, yeah, they make you brain dead, right?
Like I have
They
Mulan listed as a good version of the liar revealed. When she's revealed to be a woman, spoilers,
hmm
we're going to be saying that a lot today.
Yeah, I should start saying that too. Okay. Wait
Yeah.
a second. All right, so that's what you meant was the liar revealed, right? Just clarify that again, that to
Yes,
me.
because okay, it's basically, especially in love stories or
Uh-huh.
some other things like that, they lie
Yeah,
to further some action of theirs,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then they get found out, and for that one lie, they're hated for the entire third act.
Ah, yeah.
And
We
then they
talked about
come
this, yeah.
back and everything's okay. There needs to be stakes, or there needs to be a reason. And Mulan, it makes perfect sense because basically she helped save the rest of the army. She would have been entirely killed once she was found out to be a woman, but because she
Yeah.
saved them, she was allowed to live. It makes perfect sense for them to not trust her because, well, it's just part of the culture at the time. So there needs to be either a reason, or I think comedy can do it as
Yeah,
well.
that
Like,
comedy can do too. I mean, that reminds me of again back to Shakespeare, right? Twelfth Night, for example, all
mm,
that gender confusion, right? I mean,
yep.
that's what still makes the play so relevant.
That's like
And
half of the Shakespeare comedies, by the way.
yeah, it is actually. I mean, he started that whole kind of what's the name? There's a name
Gender bending
of that
or
genre.
something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there might be another one as well because it's also very popular in God, when is it? I think it's Edwardian. I'm getting this wrong, I think, but it's in a particular era of playwriting. It became very popular again after Shakespeare. Had already written all this.
So,
I don't know right now, but the point is that it did become a trend
mm,
again, and at least again a few times. I think it's something that people are always interested in, right?
mm,
And the same with liars, and that's a different thing. But that's different. You see, I think if it's gender role playing or whatever, that seems to be kind of in the realms of comedy. That seems okay as long as it's in the realm of comedy. But as soon as it enters drama or tragedy, it's just you're a big liar, and it seems like people just hate the liar always, as
it,
you say, and that becomes the cliche,
it's
right?
blown out of proportion, yeah. The one I
Yeah.
was thinking of, and as an Irishman, I hope you have read this by now, but Playboy of the Western World.
Oh, I'm afraid to disappoint you. I have to read it now
Me
for the
too.
next podcast so I can look a bit better. But it is a play that was constantly mentioned by my grandfather, so I should read it. But go
Yes.
ahead. What happens in
Uh,
the play? Without spoilers. I don't want any spoilers for this one.
Basically, he goes around saying that he killed a man, that he killed his father,
Okay.
and it
Okay.
causes comedic events to happen.
Meaning, okay, it's very general. Okay.
I can't tell you
Okay.
anymore because it really would spoil it.
I don't want spoilers for this one. And I've
No,
been looking. Look, I've been looking forward to reading this for like a long time, so we can talk about the next time. Skip the play.
that's all
Skip
right.
the play.
That's all right.
I'll read it the next time. But basically, what you're saying is that it happens again. That he gets treated badly for having lied.
Actually, so what happens is he comes in saying that he killed his father, and he's treated remarkably well,
Okay.
like a hero, and like, oh man, this guy actually killed someone. Ooh, he's cool.
All right. Okay.
So
Well, that's interesting. So
kind of like that
that's a
high
bit different then, right?
school image of, oh man, this guy's badass.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
that's the synopsis that I
Another
can give you.
kind of another cliche, isn't it? Even though here it sounds a bit absurd, but it's a bit this kind of old Western cliche of being, you're a
Yeah.
man as soon as you kill another man, sort of thing, and it's not really. You're just a bit of a probably psychologically damaged for the rest of your life.
I'll just say this one turns it on its head. But it
Okay.
does kind of bleed into that cliche a little bit. But I think near the end, it does steer clear of it enough.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Did you have any others on your
Yeah.
list that you wanted to discuss?
I want to discuss very much related to women. It's being a man, so very much related to what we talked about. So there's being a man. What does it mean? Does it mean well? Because it's supposed to mean that you're a manly figure, but what does man even mean? It doesn't make any sense for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to mean that you're strong and reliable and active versus the passive figure of women and sort of kind of a useless figure of woman. So it's the flip side of woman stereotypes. This manly man, which doesn't make sense, by the way, manly man, because it's a it's a it's an imagined concept. Because in the second novel, it's basically not sure if I told you much about it, but it's supposed to be a kind of a western set in '69, but 1869. But he's not at all your typical kind of man that's portrayed in westerns. And that's because I'm trying to go against that, and I'm trying to incorporate women characters in it who are not passive, who are rather active. And
Hmm.
this guy is he's more passive. So it's more like things happen around him all the time, and he's just constantly reacting to it. So he does get out the old shotgun, but it's constantly him reacting to this. Because those are cliches I hate. That the man is always so self confident. He knows what to do. And to talk about now some works that I admire, it's for example the anime Neon Genesis
Oh,
Evangelion.
okay. Yep.
Now, to be honest, now most people hate the character of
Shinji.
what's his name, Shinji, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, but I think that's a very realistic portrayal of a teenage boy. A teenage boy is not gonna, he's not gonna get on a robot and kind of save the world.
No,
That's not
he's
gonna happen.
not. But I think
Yeah.
a teenage boy seeing a giant robot is going to be a lot more excited than Shinji was.
No, no, what? But I don't know. I don't think so. I think he'd be pissing his pants, honestly, because it's just he's supposed to save the world. You see, if it starts going down a road where he's all excited, that's the reaction you expect from movies and from stories. If you're actually in real life, and for some goddamn reason there are aliens attacking the Earth, or these constructed sort of, what are they called, angels,
Yes.
and I think that's more realistic, and I see that so little. I see that even less than again strong woman portrayals, was actually just a realistic kind of man who's not so manly. I only see that maybe in tragic comedies or comedies like American Beauty, for example, where it's a
All right.
very kind of, but then he's almost too stereotypical middle-aged
That's
Kevin Spacey character.
That's
That's
kind of the
also bad.
thing, though. A lot of movies, so you have to really toe a fine line here. You either have the toxic masculine man, or you have the one
Mm,
who's a complete buffoon. So, like
yeah,
the main example people I hear give, it's Tim the Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement. He just doesn't have really any strength to his character. Like a lot of people, especially from like a toxic masculine community, basically
yeah,
they're going
you
to
can say
say
it like
like
that.
his wife has him by the balls or whatever. He just comes across as an idiot a lot of the time, and
Mm,
that's how a lot of men are portrayed in at least sitcoms in the
yeah, that's
United
true too.
States.
That's damaging too. So I'm trying to, at least for me, because I'm really trying to get into character writing and making them realistic. So those are my two cliches. So it's all about misinterpretation of women, misinterpretation of men, and the Deus Ex Machina. So for me, it's the cliches that really annoy me are, as is this writer's workshop, they're all things that get in the way of writing.
Hmm.
Because I want to finish a story. I want to get on with the story. And Deus Ex Machina is in the way, and the cliche of men and women are in the way. Also, bad establishment, that's all in the way. So I feel cliche for me is I don't. It's not something that I obsess with when I'm watching something, and no one cares about it. You're just watching a movie. I think everyone who starts writing or making a movie, creating a story, starts worrying about all this stuff. Yeah, it becomes something in the way. You have to kind of clean your path ahead of you. So the path ahead of you is full of pebbles. You just have to clear it.
So I
That's
guess
what
the question
cliches.
is like, how are you going to handle sexuality and gender in your writing?
Yeah, well. Look, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So I mean, that's why I find this writers' workshop interesting because there's no real solution yet. But at least so in the first novel, it's not really a children's book, but it's constructed like a fairy tale. So there isn't any sexuality in the book there.
Doesn't need
But
to.
that in some yeah, but that in some ways is escaping the problem in some sense, or at least not having to worry about it because it's also meant for teenagers or whatever kid. But in the second novel, it's my intention to talk about these issues. So I make sex quite a big, without going without going 50 Shades of Grey. But I make sex quite a big thing in the story. And my solution is to break down with these barriers. Is I make him gender fluid.
Okay.
That he's basically he's a man basically, but I want to make him as feminine as possible without going that he's kind of a stereotypical feminine man. So I'm trying to construct a very barrierless character. So he doesn't have any barriers of thinking he has to be this and this to be a manly person. My second solution is that he's bisexual. I think that's a lot easier, or pansexual. I think that's easier than going that he's a gay man or he's a heterosexual man, and even bisexual is that he's pansexual. That he doesn't think about this. So I think that's one way of dealing with it.
In a
But that
way,
would be, I think,
you're
yeah,
just making him human, right? Like, this happens.
exactly,
People
yeah,
are like that. So, like,
exactly.
I'm not a manly man. I'm not very effeminate. I'm somewhere in the middle.
We all are, you see. We
Yeah.
all are, and then we try to push ourselves to a certain direction. Perhaps that's why no homosexual men, openly homosexual men, can come across as so feminine because perhaps they feel they need to be feminine, but they don't. They don't. I feel like sometimes they probably feel the pressure to think that, oh, if I'm gay, I should be more like a gay person. And the heterosexual man is like, oh, but I'm a heterosexual man, I should be manly,
Hmm.
muscles and all that stuff, go to the gym.
I think it's more
And
the
so,
latter. That it's
yeah,
like we're told not to act certain ways. Like, I get super
right, yeah,
passionate about something with some of my friends, and they're like, hey, calm down. You're telling
yeah.
me to calm down about something I love. Like, you're telling me just to stop loving things and have no emotion. I hate it.
Well,
That's
so you
just,
see,
yeah,
that's what we gotta do. So we gotta write more stories with those kind of characters. So I
yeah.
feel that's what I'm doing, and I'm very conscientious about it. I try to think about taking all that away from this person and just having his pure being in some sense. It makes it sound innocent. What I mean is without pretense. So
Hmm.
whatever it is that inside that also comes out. But there's one problem with it though, I think. So I'm wondering if you could help me out with this.
That's what we're here for.
Um, it's a western, right? So
Okay.
it's set after just after Civil War, and but
Which Civil
basically
War?
I'm constructing, and the American Civil War,
Okay.
excuse me.
Thank you.
And so everyone's kind of everyone's changing sides and benefiting and all that. That's the kind of background, by the way. So I feel like it's a very tense background anyway. Oh, I feel like 1869 must have been a year where people were pretending to be something else the whole time. The Federalists lost, so I feel like a lot of them probably pretended to be on the winner side. So I feel like particularly that year is a year that's full of pretense, perhaps. So it's my intention though to put him there. I did it on purpose though, so that there's a contrast between him being so openly himself and everyone else kind of being very manly or women being very womanly, whatever.
I feel like you're
But
gonna.
my problem,
Hmm.
yeah,
I was gonna say, I feel like with that, you're gonna fall into the trap of him being himself and everyone
mm-hmm.
else being against him just for being himself, which is kind of like that establishment
Mm,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, see, that's a good point. So that
I
there's a trap I just.
I would recommend not doing it in like 1879. Do Old West, but do it in a completely different world, maybe.
All
Like,
right.
don't let it be just confined to America. Maybe
Okay.
have it so that there are people that might be prejudiced, but you also will have people who are like, oh yeah, that's just normal. Make it
Oh,
modernized Western, maybe.
fair enough. Yeah. I feel like that could work. Yeah. I also intend to move it away from the U.S. so that it goes to other places. So that might work as well. But I think it's a good point you mentioned. Not that everyone goes against him. That's the problem with the story, that everyone is going against him.
Hmm.
I feel like you're right. That could be just the establishment having to get rid of that person that that stands out, but it's making every other character potentially two-dimensional.
Yeah.
That's the problem as well.
If you want to do a time period that it can really work in, it would be the 60s, 70s, or 80s.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point because I think another problem is if you're making a person so what's the word? The person stands out and perhaps he's not at all realistic because I mean that kind of person probably didn't even exist in 1869. You know what I mean? That'd be so open. So I feel like it's a bit fantastic, and I don't necessarily want it to be that.
I think you're
So
trying
it
to
might
make
be
it
a
more
good
about
idea.
the prejudice than about other parts that you want to focus on.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good idea. So I have to look out. So again, we just talked about think about the so in this case it's the baddest the big establishment, bad establishment,
Or at least give him
and
a very
also about
clear reason why they wouldn't like him. Yeah.
okay. Right. And you see,
Like,
that's a good point.
it's not people's sexuality and that isn't going to always be the forefront. Like, you could
Yeah.
have him be something completely different, and that's just how would I say? That would just be like the foundation of his character, but it's not who he is.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another good point. So again with writing, there's a quote, kill your darlings. So it's kind of kill your favorite lines, kill your favorite ideas. So because I'm very interested in this theme, it might be a dominating story, it might be eating up the story in some sense. So it's killing the story in some sense that I'm focusing too much on this guy being so different to everyone else.
Mm.
Because in the end, the story might be something else. I mean, it's not supposed to be this philosophical essay about identity. It is supposed to be a Western in the end. So it's also maybe not obsessing about something, which
Yeah.
is
He could be an outlaw. He could be really anything. Still could be the main character. You don't want to get into the trap of making him the bad guy and just like demonizing him.
Yeah, definitely not. No.
But I don't think you have to worry about that. So yeah, actually, I just thought of an idea today that I haven't really gotten into much because I was thinking about this podcast and today's discussion, and I was thinking I have nothing that I want to write based on what I've thought about here. Until this morning, I thought about what's interesting, and status quo came to mind. Like, there's so much right now going on with the status quo. It's changing so much. And that brings me to like the cliche I hate, which is just propaganda plays.
Okay.
I want to kind of do one at the same time. So you know how
I know what you mean.
in Japan, like there's so little being done. It's always reactive and never proactive.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So I kind of want a story where this person representing Japanese, an actual Japanese person, preferably, who's kind of in the middle of all this crap going on, and he can still have a character arc going from not responding to anything into believing in something. And this is also coming from me, because I used to be very anti-political. I hated anything to do with politics. I've gotten a bit more political recently with current events, and so I think I'd be able to put a bit of myself in it. I just don't have much of a clear idea what I would do after that. It is propaganda saying, like, Japan, you need to change, because it's living very far in the past, it seems.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, well, I know what you mean, because propaganda plays. Well, I know more about propaganda films. So, like the Soviets, I mean, Lenin said it's the most film is the most useful tool to use to influence the masses. So basically, that's why in my mind it's a lot of kind of propaganda or films, just in my mind. On both sides, it works. So I feel like obviously the Nazis used it, but a lot of the famous propaganda films nowadays, they're very left wing. So the ones you see in the high sense. So Soviet cinema.
Okay. Yeah.
Not only, yeah. I'm talking about so I'm talking about when you look back at the classics, you don't really watch too much Nazi propaganda films, but they do watch a lot of kind of Battleship Potemkin, Eisenstein, all these Soviet propaganda films. But I know what you mean, because there have been plenty of progressive propaganda films that use the same tools to talk about something we might be for. So I feel like, if you're for Biden or for Trump, you're both going to use the same kind of tools. You're going to use some kind of propaganda film or play or message. It's the best way to influence the masses, but you are nevertheless manipulating the masses, I feel like, even though the message might be good. So I feel that's very dangerous, right?
But I want the message to be clear, and for there not to be any good or bad whatsoever. The way I picture it, and kind of helping with this discussion here, is I'm imagining like a Japanese guy maybe on a train, for example, reading a newspaper. Something happens to the left of him. He turns to the right, continues reading his newspaper. Something happens on the right. He moves back to the center or to the left and ignores what's going on around him the entire time. Speaks absolutely nothing until the very end, where he finally makes a decision and does something.
Interesting.
It's more tackling.
I get it. Hold on a second, but you don't know what he does. Am I right? Is that where you're going?
I haven't really pieced together, like, all right, what's going to be happening around him? I don't know what he's going to say at the end. It's more just, I think that would be a very interesting idea. And just to show that there does need to be change and there has to be some proactive events happening, at least in this country, because it's always about maintain
I,
the status quo. And that is a
yeah, I get
very
it. Yeah,
Tory idea, like the
yeah,
British Conservative Party.
and I get it though. And look, I get it because you're not saying you have to do this and that. Because I feel that's a bit dangerous. Always this
No.
kind of giving this message. What you're saying is simply whatever you decide for, just do something.
Yes,
Please don't be this passive Japan you've been for so long.
exactly.
So I like that idea. I like that idea, and I feel that's not using cliches.
And I
If
don't
I
want it to
can't
be
see
political
anything,
whatsoever. I just wanted
yeah,
to show that kind of do something, please. And like, I do want to open their eyes up to what's going on. Like, I wouldn't mind if there's something happening that could be like racist going on, because
yeah,
there's that systemic racism at times here in the country, or something going on with their own. I don't even know much about the current politics here, I guess. Everyone's
yeah.
just focused on the virus at the moment.
Well, I mean, well, you just got the new PM today, right? Or was it yesterday? You got
So he just became the head of the party, but this is something else
okay.
because there aren't other parties that can do anything in this country.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So he's going to
You got
become
that.
prime minister. He's got like a 99% chance.
Well, look, that's great for Japan, I think, and maybe like Russia, for example, as well. What I mean is all these countries that only have one party. And I feel like Japan is one, and China and Russia are maybe more extreme, but they're all countries that only follow the one party.
Well,
And
Japan
it
does
means
have
like
more than one party. They're
it
just
does, but
not going to
yeah,
have power, really. I guess
yeah,
kind of
that's
like
what I
China.
mean. I mean, they has. I think no, I think every single prime minister since the war ended has been from the same party, right?
No.
Oh no, okay,
It's been LDP and DPJ, but the DPJ is completely gone. Uh,
okay,
their last prime minister was back in 2008, maybe 2009.
okay, okay. I didn't know that.
Yep.
But what I mean is that it's very useful though to either play like this with two opinions because it's a country at least to the most part dominated by this one party, also dominated by just people not caring. So it seems like this party is always getting to power. I mean, they're terrible prime ministers as well. And I feel like people could just stand up and express their opinion because they do have an opinion. It's just that it's a Japanese mentality, right? We've already talked about this. You know, don't disrupt the status quo.
I think I kind of know how I want to do it. At least the setting. It's going to be in the
Yeah.
train. The train is stopped on the tracks because of an accident. The doors won't open, and there's so much going around him. So he tries to go to the door to
Oh,
like
great.
escape the situation, like is kind of the normal thing a lot of people want to do, but he can't. So
Yeah.
he actually has to face the issue in a way.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be melodramatic or anything like that. It can just be like
Hmm.
it's just literally just waiting for them to open the door. And then you've got people of different opinions talking about different historic events or just different things
And just
basically.
have him
And
react.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I think there's only one danger about this. This
Hmm.
is again, you might accidentally make all other characters stereotypes of a certain idea. That's one thing you might have to look out for. It's something very typical in propaganda. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't call your let's play a propaganda play. So what I mean is it's very typical plays with a certain message, like in this one. So
Hmm.
I feel like you could accidentally have the characters be too stereotypical. So like this punk girl who's like vegan, very very stereotypical, and the other guy just kind of very conservative, thinking that Japan did great stuff during the war and
Yeah,
stuff like that, or just the otaku guy. So just be careful, maybe not doing the stereotypes.
I agree.
Um, they could have a blend of and then you could have less characters because they could have a blend of opinions, for example, and they could all ricochet around this character, and he's just listening.
Yeah,
They just have to make sure that the characters remain three-dimensional, not three-dimensional. What's the
definitely,
word?
definitely. I'm imagining
Yeah,
now like
realistic.
other people on the train, like two people talking about like some of the discrimination and racism on the like going on just between those two, and he just overhears it, and he just
Yeah,
laughs to himself like, huh, "There's no discrimination," things like that,
that
and
could
that's
be
just
good too.
such a
Yeah,
common thing people say, or yeah, there's no discrimination in Japan, and
well, that's a good. Yeah, I
it's
like
just
that.
I want to open their eyes to it in a way, but I got to do it in a way
Yeah,
that's not going to be beating them over the head with it, but also that's not going to push them in any wrong way.
And I think if you got a message you want to deliver it, don't do too much of it.
Yeah.
Don't make it too obvious at the end. Just at the end, they're supposed to think a bit, and then maybe after a while they realize, oh, maybe we should do this. They should come. So Socratic method, right? Methodology. So basically, they should come up with the solutions. You're just asking them. They're answering the questions, and so that's why Socrates was such a great philosopher. He didn't give them the answers. He made the others answers, and then if the person answers their own question, then they fully understand the question. If they deliver it to it on a plate.
Yeah, I create the situation and work with the character through it, trying to figure out how I would respond.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I like that idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
It could be a great play, and a cheap play, to be honest, as well. You've got to think about money. If you got to think about money as well, right? So I mean, it's very easy. It's just
I think it'd be like a 20-minute play or something. Who knows?
Yeah. And just imagine, like, train wreckage a bit. Not really. It doesn't even.
It's not going to be a wreck. No, I think it's just going to be stopped on the tracks and saying, like, unfortunately, the train's going to be delayed.
That makes better sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it becomes like post-apocalyptic. No,
I would hate that.
It's just a train stopped. Yeah, I like that idea. It's great. Yeah. So we just got to be careful about the cliches, and again, also a bit about the big establishments. So I think some pros of Japan have to be mentioned as well, to compensate as well. Because I think right now we're more like critical of every single country. We're not having a go at Japan, but
no.
I think I'll be critical of every single country. But I think in this play, it's also perhaps good to not make it so clear that it's not that the big establishment is just Japanese society being passive. Perhaps it's the mentality, something less tangible, perhaps.
True.
Not just Shinzo Abe and his crew.
It doesn't have to be just Japan. That's fair. Yeah. Getting people to actually be active and in their communities.
And I think one more thing I'd be careful about is that this will be great as a short play.
Yes.
But the temptation is there to cram all the history of Japan in it, I think. And you don't want to do that, right?
No, I don't want to do that at all. I want it to be a couple conversations that you're likely to hear, something that's maybe left-wing, something that's more right-wing, and just someone who wants to stay out of it, but they find that they need to have some action. And then I think when they try to make that action, fade to black.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's awesome, man.
So thank you very much for talking with me about that idea there. I think we might have to wrap up this first podcast that we're doing together. We've been going for an hour.
Okay. Okay, it's been a bit long, but I've enjoyed it.
Any last thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to the next conversation, and let's just think about this. And I've got a lot of food for thought now, so I'm gonna just digest it.
Same here.
As I hope the others will too. Yeah.
All right. So that seems like it will be it for this topic. We'll continue this discussion next week, but thank you very much for joining us. And as always, we're here and we're listening.